The ocean air had been cool enough to keep my bedroom window cracked open, letting in the steady hush of waves from the shore below. I'd fallen asleep to that sound, trusting the lock on my door, trusting the roof over my head, trusting the people under it. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, those quiet waves masked the faintest creak of the door. I didn't hear the soft tread across the rug or the whisper of my desk drawer sliding open. I didn't feel the shift in the air when my wallet was lifted from the top. In the dim light, my younger sister, Maris, moved like someone on a mission, fingers closing over the black card tucked neatly in its slot. She slipped out the way she came in, my breathing still even, my world still intact. It wasn't until dawn that the first vibration rattled the nightstand. I groaned, turning over, blinking at the pale light spilling through the blinds. My phone screen glowed with notifications, one, then another, then a cascade. At first, I assumed it was spam, but the numbers in bold $1,250, $3,000, $3,400 cut through my fog like ice water. I sat up, heart ticking faster, scrolling through the timestamps, all within 20 minutes. Between 2:07 and 2:30 a.m., airline tickets, a boutique I'd never heard of, a high-end jewelry store. The next transaction was smaller, $600, but still enough to make my stomach knot. I reached for my wallet on instinct. The weight was wrong before I even opened it. The slot where the card belonged was empty. I lived alone, except for Maris, who'd been crashing for the last 2 months. My jaw tightened. The notifications kept coming, but my mind was already moving ahead, tracing the only path this could have taken and where it might lead next. I gripped the phone tighter, scrolling back through the charges to be sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. $1,250 to an airline. $3,000 at a luxury boutique I'd never set foot in. $3,400 for jewelry. $600 for some restaurant in a city I wasn't in. The room felt smaller with each line item I read. I pushed out of bed and crossed the hall. Maris's door was ajar, the blinds still drawn. Her bed was perfectly made, the air faintly scented with her perfume, but the charger on the nightstand blinked without a phone attached. I checked the kitchen, dark and cold, the bathroom empty. When I reached the front door, it was sitting slightly open, letting in a thin blade of sea breeze. I closed it slowly, as if sealing something in. My pulse was steady now, not because I was calm, but because the pieces were already falling into place. By 8, I had my coffee cooling beside me and my laptop open, out of habit. I checked social media before diving into work. That's when her face filled the screen. Maris, grinning ear to ear in a sleek airport lounge. One arm thrown around our cousin Taryn Lowe. Both held glossy boarding passes angled toward the camera. The timestamp 2:54 a.m. The caption, "Life's too short. Make it luxurious." The anger I expected didn't come in a sharp burst. It settled like a heavy coat across my shoulders. There was nothing frantic about it. I knew exactly where she was, what she was doing, and how she paid for it. I closed the browser, drained the last of my coffee, and sat very still. If she thought she'd gotten away with something, she was wrong. If she thought I'd come charging after her, she didn't know me at all. I had no interest in chasing her across an ocean. I'd wait. And when she came back, I'd be ready. Maris had been the family jewel from the moment she was born. Everyone said she had a smile that could melt granite. And apparently, it was enough to dissolve any notion of consequences. If she broke something, it was an accident. If she failed at something, it was because the task wasn't worthy of her talent. Every wrong turn was just another life experience she was meant to have. I, on the other hand, was the reliable one. The one who didn't need to be reminded to do homework, who found after-school jobs to cover my own expenses, who knew better than to ask for help unless it was life or death. Dad Roland liked to call me steady. as though it were a compliment. It wasn't. It was his shorthand for, "We can take from you without worrying you'll complain." When Maris turned 16 and wanted a car, Dad bought her a used convertible she promptly drove into a fence while texting. He replaced it the next week with something newer so she'd feel safe. When I turned 16, I got a lecture about saving for college and a reminder that public transportation was character building. Mom Elaine kept her role as referee by pretending the game wasn't happening. She'd nod along to Dad's decisions, murmur something about family harmony, and then ask me quietly if I could help your sister out. Just this once. Of course, just this once had stretched over years, paying her rent when she quit yet another job, covering utility bills because her roommate's situation fell apart, lending her my car when hers was in the shop, even though I needed it for work, every time. I told myself I was keeping the peace. It wasn't peace. It was enabling, dressed up as loyalty. And as I sat at my kitchen table, the glow of her Tokyo post still burned into my mind. I realized there was nothing left in me to give her. This time, she hadn't just crossed a line. She'd set fire to it. Dad would have believed me even less if he knew the truth about the card. It wasn't just a personal credit card. It was tied directly to my consulting business. Every client payment, every vendor transaction, every operational expense ran through that account. And I'd designed it to be as secure as possible. The bank's fraud alerts were just the surface. My own system, built over years of late nights and caffeine, logged every single charge in real time. It pulled merchant details, cross-referenced them with geolocation data, and, if the merchant had cooperating security, pulled still images from CCTV. Most people wouldn't think to protect themselves like this, but most people didn't know what it was like to have the rug pulled out from under them and be told it was just family. I froze the card before her plane was even halfway over the Pacific. Then I filed the fraud report, uploading the first wave of data before my coffee had cooled. Every purchase was there in clean. Irrefutable lines, the airline ticket to Tokyo, the boutique in Ginza, the duty-free champagne, even the $900 slippers she was probably wearing as she sipped first-class mimosas. The bank told me an investigator would be in touch. I knew they'd reverse the charges eventually, but eventually didn't pay my rent or keep my business running. I had a client payment due to clear in a few days, a payment that would cover a vendor invoice I couldn't afford to delay. If the account wasn't settled by then, it wouldn't just be an inconvenience. It could tarnish the reliability I'd spent years building. I started compiling everything into a neat package: timestamps, locations, photos where available. Not for Dad, not even for the bank, for me. A record that this wasn't a misunderstanding or a lapse in judgment. This was theft, carried out with the confidence of someone who'd never had to fear consequences. By the time I closed the laptop, the sun was fully up, flooding the apartment with pale gold light. I sat back, hands wrapped around my coffee mug, letting the weight of the situation settle in my chest. When she walked back through my door, I wouldn't just be ready to confront her. I'd be ready to end the game entirely. Maris breezed back into my apartment exactly 7 days after her disappearing act, dragging 2 overstuffed suitcases that could have doubled as small closets. She wore silk lounge pants and a pair of blush pink slippers I recognized instantly from one of the charges, $900 in Ginza, Tokyo. Dad trailed behind her, hands in his jacket pockets, his expression already set in that familiar blend of disappointment and disapproval, like I'd been caught vandalizing the family name just by existing. She didn't bother with hello. He didn't either. I stood in the doorway to the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, pretending not to notice the way Maris scanned the apartment like she owned it. Her perfume, something expensive and heady, clung to the air. Dad cleared his throat and said they'd only be here a few minutes. Just to get a few things? Perfect, I said, keeping my tone light. Actually, I was going to invite you both to dinner later this week. My treat. We should clear the air. Maris smirked, like she'd already won whatever argument she thought we were having. Dad's eyes narrowed suspiciously, but he nodded. if it means we can put this behind us. That's the idea, I said. By the time Friday rolled around, the table was set takeout from her favorite sushi place in neat containers, the kind of overpriced order she'd gush over. I'd arranged the plates, poured the tea, and set my laptop just out of sight on the sideboard. Inside was the file I'd been building all week: receipts, timestamps, merchant records, and more than one high-resolution photo of her swiping my card. When they arrived, Maris floated to the table in the same silk robe she'd been wearing earlier in the week. Dad sat across from me, arms crossed. They both dug in quickly, making polite comments about the food. I let them. I smiled, passing the soy sauce across the table. "So," I said, my voice calm, almost casual, "about the $11,500 you spent on my business card." Maris barely looked up from her plate when I mentioned the $11,500. She let out a quick, airy laugh. "Oh my God, you're still on that, I told you. I didn't touch your money." Dad set his chopsticks down, fixing me with that weary, put-upon look I knew too well. "Adria, enough. This paranoia of yours is exhausting. Your sister just got back from a trip she paid for herself. Let it go." I leaned back slightly, letting the quiet stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. Then I reached to the sideboard, pulled my laptop into view, and with one click brought the first image onto the screen. Timestamp 2, 54 a.m., local airport lounge, Maris and Taryn holding champagne flutes. Boarding passes clearly visible. Dad's jaw went slack. Maris's chopsticks slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the plate. Click. Next image: duty-free shop at Haneda Airport. Maris's hand mid-swipe of my card. Designer bags hanging from her arm. Click. Another boutique in Ginza. The same slippers she was wearing at my table displayed in the shopping bag, looped over her wrist. "Stop," she said sharply, her voice cracking just a little. "These could be faked." I tilted my head, feigning thoughtfulness. "Could be, except the bank already confirmed every charge. They've reversed them pending the outcome of the fraud claim, and the police have a copy of this report." I tapped the screen. "Case number's at the bottom, in case you'd like to check." Her face drained of color. Dad recovered enough to slam his palm against the table. "You don't call the police on family. We settle things privately." My smile didn't reach my eyes. Privately is how this has gone on for years. Privately is why she thought she could do this without consequence. Maris pushed her chair back so abruptly it bumped the wall. "You're ruining my life." "No," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm ending the part of mine where you take without asking." The room went silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I closed the laptop, slid it aside, and folded my hands on the table, already knowing what I was going to say next. I reached under the table, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and slid it toward Maris. She stared at it like it might explode. "That's the police report," I said evenly. "Every transaction you made, every piece of proof I have, and the case number if you feel like checking. You'll need it, since you're moving out tonight." Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. Dad straightened in his chair. "Absolutely not. She's your sister. You don't just throw her out over a mistake." I met his eyes, unblinking. "I don't want either of you in my apartment again until you admit what she did and apologize for siding against me." Dad's face darkened. "You're being heartless." Across from him, Maris's voice shot up in pitch. "You're ruining my life." Something in me broke, then not from their words, but from the sheer absurdity of hearing them after everything they'd taken. My voice rose for the first time all evening, sharp enough to cut through the air. "I'm saving mine." The silence that followed was thick, vibrating with the things none of us were saying. Maris's eyes darted toward Dad, as if he might pull another miracle out of his pocket to shield her. He didn't move. I stood, walked to the front door, and held it open. "Start packing. Maris, you've got until tonight." And, Dad, if you want to be in my life, you know what needs to happen. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Maris shoved back from the table, the chair legs screeching against the floor. Dad followed her out, muttering under his breath. But I didn't bother to listen. When the door closed behind them, the apartment felt different, lighter, but charged. I knew the calls and messages would start soon. The messages started within an hour. First from Maris, short bursts of guilt-wrapped barbs. You've always hated me. You're overreacting. This will tear the family apart. Then the voice memos came, half crying, half accusing, her words breaking under the strain of performance. By morning, it was Mom on my doorstep. She didn't knock, just walked in like she still had the right. "She's staying at a motel," she announced, setting her purse on the counter. "It's awful. You've humiliated your sister." I leaned back against the sink, arms crossed. I didn't humiliate her. She did that herself. Mom's mouth tightened. Family matters shouldn't be public. They're public because she made $11,500 worth of unauthorized purchases, and now the police are handling it. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't answer. She left soon after, muttering about Dad being furious. 2 days later, the call came from Detective Harris. The case had progressed. Maris had 2 options: repay the full amount and sign an admission of guilt, or face formal charges. I thanked him, knowing which option she'd try to take. That afternoon, my phone lit up with a call from Taryn. I let it ring twice before answering. "Adria," she said in a falsely sweet tone. We both know jail time would ruin her. "Can't you just help her out?" I waited a beat. If I were you, I'd delete that Tokyo photo dump before the police start asking how you paid for your ticket. There was a sharp inhale. Then the line went dead. I shut my phone off for the rest of the evening. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of my laptop fan. Somewhere out there, they were scrambling, calling each other, weaving excuses. I didn't care. My part was already in motion, and the next move wasn't mine to make. Maris showed up on a gray Tuesday afternoon. No makeup, hair pulled into a knot, the silk and perfume replaced by jeans and a faded hoodie. She hovered in the doorway, shifting from foot to foot before finally stepping inside. "They're offering to drop everything if I pay you back in 6 months," she said, not meeting my eyes. "But I need you to tell them you're okay with it." I leaned against the counter, keeping my voice even. "No. Payments go through my lawyer." "I'm not signing anything. I'm not making calls, and I'm not smoothing this over." Her head snapped up, eyes glassy. "You're really done with me, aren't you?" "I was done when you took my card," I said. "This is just paperwork." For a moment, she stood there, staring at me like she wanted to argue, but whatever words she'd been holding onto seemed to dissolve. Her shoulders slumped. She turned without another word and walked out, closing the door more gently than I expected. I watched through the window as she crossed the street, her hands buried deep in her hoodie pocket, head down against the wind. The apartment felt still again, the way it had in the days before she came back from Tokyo. This time, I knew that stillness wouldn't be broken. The case would play out, the payments would come or they wouldn't, and either way, the line between us was carved too deep to be crossed. When the phone rang a week later, I didn't need to check the caller ID to know it was my lawyer. 3 months later, my inbox pinged with an email from the bank. A deposit of $11,500 had cleared Maris's final repayment. My lawyer confirmed the case was officially closed, the admission of guilt signed, and the fraud now part of her permanent record. Dad hadn't looked me in the eye since. The last time I saw him, he kept his gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder, his conversation clipped and perfunctory. Mom had retreated into silence, reaching out only for obligatory holiday messages. The apartment had taken on a new rhythm in their absence. No unexpected knocks at the door, no urgent favors dressed as family emergencies, no quiet calculations about whether I could absorb someone else's bill this month. My work accounts were balanced, the vendor payments on time, my savings growing without the constant leak of obligation. But the change went deeper than numbers on a spreadsheet, for the first time in years. I woke without the weight of someone else's chaos pressing on my chest. I didn't flinch at late-night phone calls. I didn't brace for the next crisis I'd be expected to fix. The air in my own home felt different, lighter, cleaner, mine. That night, I stood at the door and turned the lock with deliberate care. The click was soft but final. If they try again, my answer won't need evidence, proof, or negotiation. It will be one word, and it will be enough. No.